Okay, so to get started, let me just show you a few of the bits and pieces that are here first. So you can see that in my game of Pong, I've got 6 different sprites. The last one, which is the start button, we'll worry about that right towards the end. For now, we're going to start with looking at these paddles here. One's called paddle, the other one is called paddle 2. We might even rename this one called paddle 1. The key things, I guess, at the start are the paddles and the ball. And if I show you a bit of the code that's going on in the background here, if I show you the ball, looks like it's got a fair bit going on here. The paddle, same, and the red paddle, pretty similar as well. The score right and score left, well, they are the bits that are going to help us to actually score it so that we know how to keep score. So what we're going to do here is create a brand new one from start. So that's what we'll get you guys to do, is to make a fresh one from the start, and we'll name it Pong. Okay, so the first thing we really don't need is we don't need this sprite. So we're going to start by just deleting that sprite, and I'm going to create my own new sprite, and this is going to be one of the paddles. So over here on the paintbrush, I'm going to paint myself a new sprite. In the middle over here is a checkered stage, and sometimes it can be very, very difficult to see. So I'm going to grab a rectangle, select that. Have to do a bit of selecting first. I'm going to create this one as red, and down here I need to make sure it is solid in color. So rectangle, red, or whatever color you choose, and solid in color just there. And I'm going to draw it. It looks a little bit like that, and that's fine. I'm happy with that one. And back over here, I'll click on Sprite, Information, and I'm going to call this one Paddle 1. Actually, we'll call it Paddle 1 Red. Incidentally, you'll notice that, oops, I need to spell paddle right, don't I? P-A-D-D-L-E. You'll notice that there are no spaces and no capitals. You can use spaces and you can use capitals, but I would suggest you don't, because you can sometimes muck things up by doing that. So we'll just keep it all simple, lowercase, no spaces. Done. So there's my sprite. It's pretty big. Well, we'll go with it for now. I'm going to make another paddle that goes over on this side, but to make this paddle, I want it exactly the same as this paddle. So the easiest way to do it is to right click here and duplicate. So I now have 2 paddles. Clicking on the information, I'm going to call this one Paddle 2 Green. But clearly it's not green, so we need to fix that. So over on this side, I'll just click on the sprite and make sure it's selected. Over in here, under Costumes, I'm going to click the Paint Bucket tool and come down to Green and green it. Perfect. And I'm going to move that sprite just over here as well. Brilliant. So I've got my 2 paddles, and there they are. So just to get them exactly right, I'm going to move this one to the top, but you'll notice it's not hard up against the edge. It's just a bit away from the edge. That's where I want it to be. And the same with this one. Hard up against the top is fine, but not hard up against the edge, just away from the edge is good. And the reason for that is because our score panels have to go down the side, which we'll get to later. So, what do we do with our paddles? Well, we need to script them so that they can move up and down. So I'm going to go under Events, and drag in a starting event. Notice that I'm on the red panel here, and I'm going to click when space key is pressed, and I don't want space. Traditionally, on a keyboard for the left-hand player, we use A and Z. And if you look at your keyboard, A and Z are above each other. So A, and the other one is going to be Z, which is all the way down the bottom. There it is. When you press A, I need it to move. And I'm going to not make it move. I'm actually going to ask it to glide. just as soon as I find it. Here it is. Glide to that position. Now, here's something a little bit tricky. I'm going to, at the moment that's set to be at the top, but I want this thing to glide to the bottom. So, what I'm going to do, instead of grabbing another glide and putting it over here, I'm actually going to move this red sprite down to the bottom. And you'll notice that the coordinates in the glide motion element have changed. That's because that's the bottom. So I'm going to put that in. And now, if I do this, if I press A, sure enough, it goes up. And if I press Z, it goes down. You can check that yourself. So now that works, but there is one small problem. I don't know if you can tell with mine, that when I go up and then down, it moves a little bit left and right. Now, I'm not happy with that. It needs to be spot on. So if you have a look back over here in the code, the x-axis is set to -200. Sure enough, that means it's 200 pixels away from the middle. And again, but this one is 201. So that's where it's moving. It's shifting across from 200 to 201. Well, that's no good. We need to make them both exactly the same. So I'm going to click in here and change this to 200. So now, when it moves up and down, it is always staying in perfectly, exactly the same x-axis. Happy with that? Right, green paddle. Well, we need to do exactly the same thing. Back over to events, but this time I'm not going to be using A and Z because this is for player 2. I'm going to use up arrow and down arrow. Back over to motion, I'm going to glide the top one, sure enough, up there, and bring it down, grab the glide again and bring it over there. And as lucky chance would have it, 217 is the x-axis on this one, and as it would be, 217 is the x-axis on that one. So there we go. Now if I use two hands, I can make them both move up and down. So now we have our paddles created.